Okay, thank you, Lorenzo, for having me here. And as you resisted quite a lot, I have like 3 T-shirts, 2L and 1XXL. So maybe for the question at the end, or who wants to have it, looks like the one I'm wearing right now. So actually, I'm having a little bit about myself at the beginning and the project, and a few slides about other projects to understand the context. And at the end, indeed, I'm going to go on this sort of experiences, or what you could expect over the years with open source. So I'm actually Romanian, living for quite a long time in Berlin, Germany. I work in real-time communication for more than 20 years, most of it in open source, at the beginning in research. I'm a C programmer myself, so I'm not coming from the telecom world, so I'm pure networking and so on. And I'm involved also in some events, organizing Kamailio Award mentioned by uh, Lorenzo earlier, but what I want to somehow highlight, because there are some cool projects, and please look usually at the end of January, beginning of February. Actually, Saul and Lorenzo are the main organizer now, but for them it's really a nice event where you can go and present your even like small projects related to open source. So try to share, to collaborate with the others. As of Kamailio, where the name comes from, it was not the initial name of the project. It was called like SIP Express router, long time before the WebRTC, with some, let's say, evolution due to like selling the IP rights from the research institute to a commercial company. We ended up in like forking and renaming. So if you search over there or like dig the internet for the history, you might see names like OpenSCR or SCR. They're kind of part of Kamailio as a project in the past. And the name itself, it's coming from Hawaiian language, and actually is the verb to converse, to talk in that exotic language. That's why I have these islands on the background. But yeah, the history is quite long, with, let's say, quite some drama or unexpected evolution over the years. So I try to also present from that perspective. For Kamailio itself, practically it's a SIP signaling server. It was mentioned by some of the speakers before. Can do a lot of scalability, security related to IP telephony, going into like IMS, voice over LT, voice over new radio. Probably we are like first reference implementation in many of the cases, even for the industry. So they are using the projects to develop their products, to would be not server side, unlike clients and so on. Many of them benefited from this open source approach. Has tons of features, and also has nice embedding interface. So if you don't like our scripting language for the configuration file, you can do it now in Lua, Python, even JavaScript. So this config file, it's where you define how the SIP traffic is handled by the Kamailio, how to authenticate it, where to send it, how to do failure routing with it. But Kamailio, like most of the open source, is not like out of the box product. So it's practically like a toolkit, a framework to build your real-time communication platform. So it could be from a H proxy, a load balancer, a least cost router, to these PCSCFs or other IMS-related function servers. You can even integrate it pretty well with the web services. We have like what I highlighted here, client and server extension. So you do HTTP with JSON or XML. We also have like JSON web token support, and also WebSocket for WebRTC, which is together with RTP engine for the media plane because Kamailio itself is signaling only. Just have an idea for the new people that hear first time for about Kamailio. Practically for classic IP telephony, you can use it as the main telephony engine, a single server to connect hundreds, thousands of phones. We scale very well up to 100,000 active users. And you can also interconnect with other services over SIP. So you don't need like special agreements. SIP is a standard protocol. If the other system or service provider is speaking SIP and you agree on some, let's say, authentication or trust relationship, you just forward traffic between them and that's it. It doesn't have to be Kamailio, it could be Asterix, FreeSwitch, and so on. And actually, the second common case would be like front-ending some, let's say, more sensitive resources like media server or gateways to PSTN to mobile network transcoders to filter unwanted traffic or, offload some of the, let's say, high or intensive CPU operation like encryption, decryption, for example. And if you want to do WebRTC, practically you can use Kamailio with WebSocket extension and call between two browsers without any other components, so even without RTP engine. Of course, if you have NAT traversal and the ICE negotiation doesn't find a direct media path, then you might need RTP proxy or RTP engine just for media relaying. And then if you want to connect with the, let's say, old infrastructure, SIP infrastructure with like hard phones and so on, you might need to add in the picture the RTP engine, and I think maybe now RTP proxy supports it, to do gatewaying. So practically you get the WebSocket for signaling translated to classic UDP, TCP, even TLS or SCTP, we support that. And then for the media, RTP engine will take care of converting from SRTP DTLS to the plain RTP or the other variant of SRTP with SDS. Of course, you need now to work directly with Kamailio on the browser, on the client side, like a SIP JavaScript phone. And for that, you might use a couple of libraries. I think right now there are also kind of out-of-the-box phone application. I think I saw it in GitHub, but I forgot to add it here. But like JSIP or SIP.js, SIP-ML5, I think at least the first two are well maintained. And I used JSIP because I'm actually still friend with the main developers there from the Spanish WebRTC gang, to call it like that. And then that's it. Practically, you have a WebRTC. It's easy then to interconnect with old telephony system, being IP-based SIP or through some gateway to even TDM or other. So I give you the links if you want to read more about these components. Probably the last link, the one in blue, would give you a more complete configuration for Kamailio, for RTP engine, and doing all this kind of combination of bridging from WebRTC to classic SIP, but also supporting WebRTC to WebRTC or SIP to SIP, classic SIP endpoints. So that would be about, let's say, Kamailio in the WebRTC world. I told Lorenzo we haven't done much lately because I think we are also here the first to implement it in the open source world. If I'm not wrong, I track it back to like 2012 when there was support for WebSocket added in Kamailio. So if you have other questions, you can join our mailing list or ask me about it, and I can give you more details. Otherwise, yeah, as an open source developer, I contribute or main author to a couple of other projects that I wanted to highlight. For example, for Stir Shaken, there is a Golang library that I developed to our company Asipto. It's open source, but it has also like an API server, so you can run it standalone. You don't need Kamailio to do stir shake. And I know that at least North America or USA, it's kind of mandatory to have it right now. Through some REST API, you can add to your existing telephony system, because I don't think in the WebRTC is going to come soon, or it's needed. And then it has also a CLI tool that you can use for validate, for making testing easier. The second one that I want to present, this is on my personal let's say organization on GitHub. It's SIP Exer. And this actually, it's more like a CLI tool for shooting SIP messages, because we know when we develop, we don't really want to create an entire session or start the font, configure it with user password to see how a registration is done. From the WebRTC point of view, the important feature would be this support for WebSocket. So it's what I typically do when I build a WebRTC gateway with Kamailio and RTP engine. I'm not also building a SIP.js or JS SIP application and start the browser. I just use this one to see I can register over WebSocket to Kamailio, then that means at least WebSocket is set up correctly. Then yeah, for a real call, audio, video, I might need the RTP engine if I need to connect to classic SIP phones. But it has quite nice features. So you can use templates. It's a little bit tailored for SIP. If you just need like pure WebSocket, there might be other better tools, but actually the first tool that I wrote was this WSCTL for the testing of WebSocket for Kamailio. And this was actually reused to create a more SIP-oriented tool. So you have templates, you have many variables for unique IDs, for random values. Who is familiar with SIP, like you have to create like CSEC or like call ID with the different formats. So look at it, they're all open source, reuse, contribute, and so on. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more about myself. As I said, I'm mostly with Kamailio, mostly a C developer. The other two were Golang, as I like to play with language. Actually, I studied compilers in the university, like network communication and compilers. So programming languages are also something of interest for me. I don't have as much time as I would like to play with the newer one. I did also in Rust, a small project that is also using Kamailio. So you might see a couple of other different projects coming from myself. Now to the, let's say, main subject of my submission for this conference, about the journey in the open source, what I could see at cost and benefits. Of course, a little bit, filter it, not to go in the very dirty situation that could have or had happened during our evolution or development over 20 years, but trying to show you eventually, if you use an open source project or if you start an open source project, where you should, let's say, pay more attention and be careful. So first, of course, when it comes to open source, it's about choosing the programming language and the dependencies. And this, sometimes you are forced, like we started, like 2001, 2002 was actually when the first line of code was written, and we wanted portability. And at that time, we know that Linux was at the beginning. Big companies like telecoms, they were even running like VAX, VMS, and old Unixes. So C was like the only one suitable from the point of view of performance that we were targeting, as well as portability. And then we are stuck with this one. We evolved like 20 years. It's not like you can just rewrite it now in Node.js. Actually, I made the April 1st joke where I put a Node.js just executing Kamailio to say we have now a Node.js Kamailio variant. But yeah, it's not easy to change it. Even sometimes you get pressure maybe from the community or from other perspective, like commercial customers and so on. But now, yeah, some languages are harder and harder. You know, from the university, there are different interests, more web-oriented right now, so it's not easy to find like new contributors. And in open source, you don't actually pay much, so getting new contributors in C language seems to be a challenge these days. And then also C practically allows any kind of syntax. So now sometimes it's hard to figure out some of the patches contributions because different coding styles and you know how the contributor choose to implement by design. And then of course we implement as much as possible, but you can't really implement everything, right? Everyone wants like security, SSL, you know, it's complex, or connectivity to various backends. You can't implement like libraries for MySQL and Postgres and everything there. And yeah, this is good. I mean, rapid development, reuse of the knowledge and resources, but then it's always like a matter of choice sometimes. There are many libraries and or projects. You choose one and you discover in 2-3 years something happens. Developer is gone, or they change radically the API, and then you have to do a lot of work on your side. So for example, with libSSL, probably most like a decade now, they changed quite a lot. So it was a lot of effort. With some modules we went for libev, which now it's kind of unmaintained or in an unknown state, to say. So choosing, it's always something that you have to consider and try to figure out from community perspective, from who is using the library, what to do. And then also with the standards, I mean, you try to follow the standards as much as possible, and not necessarily for the protocol, but for example, we got issue with XML because there is an XML standardization group, and then the ITF or simple group, they didn't actually use the exact XML standard. So there was a mix with the use of namespaces, like, and then if you wanted to use the library for XPath, it was actually not working. You saw the field there, but because it was not prefixed with the namespace, because it was considered to be the default namespace, it was like creating issues. So we had to come with workarounds, like actually replacing namespace to make it without namespace temporarily in memory and so on. Or other situation like this can happen. And of course, self-build solution became a pain over the time. We also did it for a while, like our control interface was line-oriented, self-made, but then over the years we switched like RPC, XML RPC or JSON RPC, because it's much easier from external application point of view. Now, contributions and contributors. Of course, this is the heart and spirit of the open source. You make it public and you hope others will help you. And of course, it's useful to grow the set of the new feature and the user base. Also has good impact on quality of the project, as many use them in different situations. But then again, there is a lot of situation when, you know, developers or coders could be stubborn. They like, you know, tab indentation, white space indentation, opening curly brace after the if line or next line, and so on. So you try at the beginning to kind of accept everything, but actually over the years, some of those developers change careers and you are stuck with that one. And then it's different levels of experience and sometimes different pressure for the solution. So many of the contribution could be like workarounds, works for me, right? For my situation, in my specific case. And you have to check it, you have to look over it, try to fit it better. Then, of course, some of the developers, they look a little bit for, you know, fame, and they do some small patches, and then they want to add the copyright line at the beginning of your 10,000 lines of file. They change name of the variable to be more suggestive, and then you don't know how to approach this one. So you have to be careful sometimes and try to have actually good rules. And of course, keep in mind that friendly relation might not last forever. You know, someone can move from a company to another, and then he's still contributor, still has rights, and maybe you are not in the best relation with his new employer. Try to protect yourself somehow in a way or the other. So actually, the green one would be how to try to solve this red lines, which are the cost, and the blue lines would be like the benefits. So try to make it clear how to contribute, and make it clear for the format and how the commits should be described. Lately, we prefer small commits because they are easier to identify issues, a part of someone doing a large one across many components. So even if it's over the same component, if there are a set of features, it's better to split it into 3 commits because it's easier to understand, and, you know, like rolling back eventually the exact piece of a regression or whatsoever. And modularity by design would be good, and because then allows you to protect the important components. Like with Kamailio, I have core of the Kamailio and some important modules where we are very sensitive when new commits are pushed to them. But then if someone contributes a new module and nobody, or I'm not using it, I'm looking quickly to see, you know, the obvious problems, but otherwise no testing, because I don't use that module. If I don't load it in Kamailio, it doesn't impact performance or stability and so on. So that's also important to have in mind. Then the license and copyrights. This is always sensitive and is not easy to decide. And if you decided 20 years ago, the market has changed. When you saw that GPL is probably the best forever, now those cloud services, they run it, they patch it, and they say it's much better than yours. And yeah, some other projects got a little bit, let's say, pissed off. They switched to this like server-side public license, which is not yet considered like open source license by the OC, the Open Source Initiative. But others could offer you maybe AGPL could be a better, depending on the purpose of your service. But then, yeah, when you have a restrictive library, you might prevent contribution. So you protect in one side, but you hit the other benefit, to say, of this. And then, yeah, also from the business model could affect you. Like if you have many contributors and you don't have like contributors license agreement, which everyone kind of hates, also patents, everyone hates in open source, but there are another mechanism that could protect you in this situation. So if someone makes a contribution and has the copyright, then you are restricted every time you want, as a main developer, to do something a little bit more commercial from that perspective. And then, of course, it's open source, and sometimes, yeah, you get pissed off when someone just announced, I implemented the, I don't know, Janus API, and here is the drop-in replacement, right? You feel a little bit like, oh man, yeah, okay. But it's open source. It's usually not nice to happen, but it's not a good inspiration. So yeah, competition can copy, and we say internally, it stole it from me, or, you know. But at the end, this is the open source. And it's not only about the features of the application, but could be APIs, bug fixes, and so on. So can sometimes be a bit harsh when you discover something like a sudden announcement, right? If they might collaborate a little bit, could be something, but otherwise you feel yourself a little bit disappointed when some of these announcements show up. Then, of course, it's open source, and the projects can fork, and you could see at least there were 2 main branches and other also diverted from this initial SIP Express router and then OpenSCR Kamailio project. And we know now with Git and GitHub, forking is actually the common way of contribution, and that's really making it easier for the external contributors. But some of them, they do it only for their purposes, and then you discover that, you know, for some specific needs, people use a fork from whatsoever company or contributor. So I try to keep an eye on these ones and discuss with the developer to put it in the main repository, because over the years, we might diverge in the way of like formatting. Like 2 years ago, we did major formatting with C-line format to have everything coherent. And then we discovered that like for some of the IMS extension, there was a repository popular for Open5GS. And merging back was not as easy as would have been like 2 years ago, let's say. I met the developer or the one that did the patches at an event. We discussed to do it together. So it was some more, but it was an effort. And I think at least 2 or 3 extensions in Kamailio, maybe not the most popular ones, were also found on these soft forks. Like they still keep the name Kamailio. They kind of merge from the mainstream from time to time in their clone, but they don't feel like I should do it back to the main repository. So it can take some resources to track and then merge back. And then there are hard forks, which are cloning, renaming, and try to say, oh, now we are better, we do something more fancier, and so on. Actually, they want to build on your reputation, saying, okay, that's good, because otherwise we will not fork it. And then, yeah, they are good, but now we are better because we did 3 more patches or whatsoever, and so on. Yeah, the best is to ignore it and follow what your project needs, not what they actually claim or blame you haven't done it. Because if they did a fix and you haven't done it, it's probably because nobody in your community hit that issue. So don't think that if someone, you know, has 5 wheels to the car, you also need 5 wheels to your community or to your deployment. And then if they catch you to follow them, then practically you lose the time. You don't focus on your evolution, you try to look at them. So it doesn't work, because anyhow, over the time they will diverge. It's only a period of maybe half a year, 1 year, 3 years, where it's kind of aggressive, because again, they try to build on your shoulders. They don't try it from scratch. And you, as one of the developers of the, let's say, mainstream repository, it's hard to kind of defend and say, you know, that clone, the new project based on this fork, it's not good, because if you look at the code, you own there like 20-30% and many very useful extension, and you cannot say, yeah, don't use that one because it's crap, because when you look at the code, because they need to keep the copyright, like the load balancer module, it's yours. So it's hard to say, yeah, that's really crap application. So it's like making yourself a fool. So again, I think ignoring it's the best in this situation, and focus on the future of what you need rather than trying to over. I think I went backwards, sorry. Well, now community, hopefully I'm running a bit out of time. Yeah, it's where all the fun is, right? It's why we met here, FOSDEM and other, but also the pain, right? Learning a lot from others on different topics, not main one. You are SIP expert or WebRTC expert, but then it's infrastructure to take care of libraries that you like to use. It's also a source of good references. Yeah, that company is using my project and so on, and meeting people, traveling, and making friends. Many of Lorenzo friends, as he stated here, were made in the community. But then, yeah, here's the other side, aggressive and sometimes abusive attitude. There are many of them coming and blame the developers, because of the design, lack of documentation, and although there are some tutorials there, they don't see it because it's not in front of their nose, and usually they treat you as being their employer. I need this feature when it's the roadmap to implement it. And yeah, many don't follow the guidelines in exact description because they consider it sensitive, that they put there some private IP or whatsoever, or they don't have the idea of replacing it. And of course, many of them promise a lot, like, okay, I'll be the testing for you if I solve this issue, or a blog post to explain how to build this feature, and things like that don't actually happen over. So again, try to keep focus on fair users and contributors, and ignore these kind of intruders that are very noisy and aggressive, because you can't really convert them. They also disappear when they solve their issue. Events, yeah, very useful for community meetings and conferences. Doesn't have to be like conferences here with catering and so on. Could be meeting in a pub. You go to, I don't know, Paris next week to visit relatives. You can say, hey, if someone is using this project, not necessarily yours, but in your ecosystem, you can meet there for a beer or wine in France, right? And sharing experiences, development workshops are also useful. We did some in the past, even at the University of Catalonia or in Alicante in France. There were some companies hosting us, because this can boost collaboration and speed up the evolution of the project. Lately in Kamailio, we do it courtesy of SIPgate in Düsseldorf. Like every year, we meet like 10 to 15 developers. Doesn't have to be like core developers, could be also people that want to help with documentation, infrastructure, packaging. What's now with some of the free events? They could be very disappointing sometimes because it's free, many register, and then you reserve like a seminar room for 40 people and show 10, or that's sometimes not nice when you organize and you see this. So a solution could be to charge something if you can, because sometimes this has so much overhead, even if you give it back as drinks or a gift there, because the people then see better the value. And then, yeah, always it's open source. Everyone feels ownership, not only to the project because they contributed, but also to the events related. So they want to impose their style or to be like a speaker or whatever they consider to be also very important. And you have to find a balance between all these, let's say, demands. Some of them are legit, some of them less. And then also it's a lot of effort to organize it. And some people don't really see it. Like you come, you sit here, you have some nice drinks and food, and you go home. But what probably Lorenzo had to do in the past 2-3 months was actually never seen in commits or in other benefits. So again, here, making clear rules, and who is organizer, the scope, it's important. Communication channels, it's important because everyone is distributed. There are many options now, so it's hard to decide. And again, some of the projects started long time ago, not all of them being available. With Kamailio, we'll still have the mailing list as the main one, as it was the first one. But every now and then, there are coming people to say, move to forum. We have chat rooms, and then trackers. On the GitHub, we try to focus only on bug reports, because having discussion on a bug tracker about using Kamailio can be very noisy. So in that situation, we close and refer them to send a question to our users mailing list. And this, when you have many, can be like distracting for the activity. Like I don't really like that much this real-time chatting, because you don't know it's gonna write something now, or in 1 minute, or in 5 minutes, or never. So then it can be a bit time-consuming and so on. And then if you install yourself, maintenance costs and things like that. So try to define again the scope for the channel and try to cover, of course, older generation, newer generation, but have one like authoritative, like if nobody is answering on the real time chat, send to the mailing list. Don't be like disappointing and then shout out, hey, nobody's answered my question sent 5 minutes ago at midnight during the Easter or Christmas on this chat system. And yeah, define also like business relation, like separate users list or user forum from the business, because you want to foster the business as well. So having a channel to announce offers and so on, not only by you as main developer, by the others, it's also important. And the last ones, actually, I still have one. What came lately, it's very useful to ensure like minimum coherence and acceptance, especially with the GitHub actions and this virtualization and containers and other open source project. It helps a lot to detect, the simple involuntary mistakes that sometimes I even do it, like, you compile it locally, but then by mistake you press like undo, and then you make the commit, and somehow you push out like a version that doesn't compile, for example. And this kind of lifts the burden from developers a lot. And here the community can play a key role, because again, it's no longer like C development or protocol advanced knowledge. But then you have some drawbacks also if you go for like Jenkins, self-hosted installation, configuration, maintenance cost. If you use other platforms, services for it, it's a matter of privacy concerns, or if they disappear. You invested a lot on Docker Hub, now it's no longer possible to do as much as in the past, or I'm not sure if you can even do, because luckily I'm not doing this with GitHub Actions, but we moved to the GitHub Action, what used to be done in the past with Docker and like Docker Hub and other stuff. And of course, best testing it in production, get community, get users to use it in different scenarios. Then quality of the software and the project. Yeah, at least in real-time communication, everyone was like focusing on performance, like vertical scalability. It's good for marketing, but not as good as you think for the business, because stability is much more important in my opinion. And we are still focused on performance with Kamailio, but I would not make that one the main focus in my opinion. And then easiness to use can be also important for beginner users, but then as they grow into the knowledge and become more advanced, they can see that it impacts a lot the flexibility, and then they will like, lower and lower access. Like in the past, it was easy to start with asterisks, and then when you wanted to access headers, the first version of the asterisks were not as flexible as we have with Kamailio, for example. To make the project look healthy, responsiveness actually matters to the critical issues and the discussions that are important. You can't really cover all of them, but if you look like a summary and you see this looks like something serious, then you should jump on it at least with some, feedback to the community. Clear release policies also show a good state of the project, but it's not easy to please everyone, because some are more into LTS, old telephony style, some are more into WebRTC style of like new features, advanced, faster, and so on. And all this takes time and resources, and nobody pays you actually for doing releases, short term, long term, that's on you. And the last one, of course, revenue donation. As an open source developer, don't bet on donation actually, because some of them made it, but it's probably less than 0.01 in open source, in my opinion. So it's for sure a good channel for marketing. It's why everyone, even the big companies, Microsoft and so on, they do a lot of open source, because, for social benefits and so on, it looks good. Of course, sometimes you get free drinks, free dinners, or lunches at events or when you travel, and even some donations. So now it's a little bit easier with GitHub that facilitates, but again, I will not bet on it. And of course, if you look for career opportunities, acting into open source, it's really good. At some point, we lost like 2 or 3 main contributors for a while to big companies like Google and Facebook. Yeah, this Google Summer of Code, for example, and things like that. That can happen. It's just, you can't prevent this. They are not your employers. It's their choice of career and so on. And yeah, when you look at revenue sources, development, support, training, or building software as a service or communication platform variants as a service, in our case, could be business models. And then in open source, it's easy to get distracted either by community or by your passion and so on, and you discover that you lose quite a lot of time on irrelevant matters, which has negative impact on family and social life. Sometimes, you forget yourself in debugging some irrelevant issue, and you spend overnight alone, and in the morning you have to drop the kids in kindergarten and so on, and you are tired, you are not in the mood to play with them or prepare them in joyful mode. And sometimes support revenue might not be exactly what you desire, because you're interested on building something new, like evolving, and yeah, you have to think of this model where it's my main purpose. Focus on support, or actually focus on your business to create like new deployments, new platforms for other companies, new ideas. So the sponsorship, when they happen, sometimes they put pressure on developers, because when someone is doing a sponsorship, usually it comes with some questions in the next days or whatever. Not always, but it's something that you also have to balance if you accept or not. And then also the fairness of others from the same project might not be as you expected. Of course, it's a free world, they can follow, but you feel like, okay, I contribute more, and he's kind of just sitting on my back. I do a new product that is a clone of mine with a different name or similar. I do a training of someone it's also doing with the kind of the same agenda, or you feel that some of them, they follow you in the shadow, and from the balance of contribution and benefits, you don't see the same, let's say, flux of benefits towards you as they get from you eventually. So here, yeah, as a small, because usually when you start with open source, you are rather small, it's important to define and focus on some of those niches, because if you try to do all of them, probably you will not do any of them right. And if you think big, at least in real-time communication, without like big support, investors could be also parents, family, they're having enough funds. And then also, as I said, it's good for marketing, but it doesn't sell itself with open source. So you need proper management team for sales and communication or spread of your commercial variants as service or products and so on. To conclude, yeah, sometimes at the end of the day in open source, you look like this, very tired, no mood to continue. You say, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna apply to that job on this, I don't know, telecom or other big company, and they are paying well. But actually, most of the time it's like this. And with that one, sorry for going a little bit over, I guess. But I hope I gave some good, let's say, remarks, at least from different perspective for those that want to start or use or contribute to open source. Thank you, Lorenzo, for having me here.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Yeah.